Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Paris Tech webinar, Flexible and Collaborative, the new FP&A criteria. Let me introduce our speakers and myself. I'm Jessica Otero, the Director of Marketing at Paris Technologies, and I'll be your host today. And it's my pleasure to introduce John Florio, who is a Paris exec and an experienced FP&A practitioner with special expertise in the insurance and legal industries.
Good morning.
Today, we're going to be exploring the fundamental challenges FP&A teams face in today's landscape based on two use cases. We have the spreadsheet use case and the browser-based application use case. So we'll be discussing how FP&A experts are solving for these needs, and is there room for both things? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each one? So before I kick it over to John here, I'm going to launch our first poll. So please take a moment to drop your answer in this poll question. What is the most important feature for you in an FP&A solution? So the choices are flexible and collaborative, secure and controlled, cloud-based, scenario or driver-based, or predictive and AI modeling. So drop your 2 cents in there, and now I'm going to pass it over to John.
Thanks, Jess. I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining this morning. We've got 30 minutes for today's conversation. And like Jessica said, we're going to try to explore both the file-based Excel or spreadsheet world and the traditional enterprise or browser-based application. So we're going to hit both of those sides today as we talk, because they are almost polar opposite of one another. And it's a huge piece of conversation in today's world for those of you that are either using FP&A solutions that are out there right now today and wish that you had some sort of Excel, or if you're just using good old Excel, tried and true, and have been using it for years, and there are pros and cons to both. We're going to explore both, right? So the best way to start is to think about the business. And what is an FP&A solution? Like, what is it meant to do, right? So there's 3 quick bullets up there, and they kind of tie a little bit to that poll question that Jessica asked, which is, number one, you're trying to reduce the budget cycle as much as you possibly can, right? Make your life a little easier. Those of you with a calendar year close, you know that the budget season usually starts. You start to kind of get ready around September. Middle of October is when you're passing out your spreadsheets if you're file-based Excel. If you're a browser-based app, you're usually same thing around October, and you're looking for that first cut of information from everyone that's got to contribute to the budget. So collaboration and the ability to try and get that budget cycle down, very important to what you're purchasing or what you're using. Next is to try to improve planning and forecasting, right? So we all take a look at like what we've done in a previous year, and we know one thing, and we've all read those white papers, that budgeting in and of itself is dead on arrival, right? So we kind of put that information in that we think is our budget, and of course something happens in January or February that effectively destroys what's sitting out there and what we had originally budgeted, right? So we want to have something that is scalable, able to get us where we need to be and improve our process for planning and forecasting, because once we budget, we know that we're going to have to kind of reforecast that information. And in your mind, you're probably thinking, maybe Excel's not the best for that, right? But obviously scaling in a browser-based application is probably a little easier than Excel is, right? And we'll talk a little bit and explore that as well. And then last but not least, from a bullet standpoint, is trusted numbers. And it's certainly not least, it probably is almost first, right? So those of us that have come from the file-based Excel world, we know that this is the hardest thing in the world, right? Everyone's probably got, if they're sitting out there right now and they use Excel every day, everybody's probably sitting out there right now saying to themselves, I've got a tick and tie spreadsheet, right? I in my years of working in file-based Excel, I always had a tie-down sheet or a score sheet to make sure that all my other spreadsheets were tying in. And of course, it's like a needle in a haystack if it's not. And you wind up going back and looking at that information. To that end, when you're talking about Excel, very, very quickly, I think it was the market group had a study out the other day that said 88% of all spreadsheets can contain errors, and 90% of the people that are using that spreadsheet don't even know that they've got an error inside their spreadsheet. So you worry about, are the numbers, if I'm passing this on to my CFO, is he walking into the boardroom confident that everything that I've created is good? And then the last piece that's sitting out there next to it is the fast. So it's one thing to have the trusted numbers and the insights, but can you do it fast, and how flexible are you? And that's kind of where you're going to move away from the browser-based app side, right? Because you know that in Excel, you can get something a whole lot faster when your boss is asking you a question about something than you can with your browser-based app, because we'll talk a little bit about that as well, because there's certainly some rigidity that comes along with what a browser-based app is. So they each have their strengths, and we're going to explore those as we go. But whether you're using file-based Excel or a traditional enterprise application, the goal of FP&A is to help automate the business's most mission-critical processes. That obviously includes budgeting, planning, and forecasting. So that's why we drop them in that are sitting over there. But there's more to it, right? So as Jessica moves to the next slide, we'll start to get into this a little bit more. And any spreadsheet-intensive process is something that you typically will find that whether it's touching the FP&A group in some way, but it's certainly affecting the CFO, the office of the CFO. So you think about the management reporting and analysis that comes along with everything that you've done, right? Everybody wants to be able to compare. And, I used to have to put together a management's discussion and analysis. Every variance that came through versus our budget or versus our prior year numbers was investigated and analyzed. How did we get there? Why is it changing? What's the reason for the change, and will that change continue? And that is a very intensive business process when you're trying to put something like that together. Same goes for the financial close. Let's stop there for a minute, right? All of our enterprise resource planning systems, all of our GLs, we can get a financial close. Yep, no issue whatsoever. And that information closes down, and now it's time to do some investigation. And we know, and the reason why we use traditional enterprise applications for budgeting and forecasting, or we use Excel, is because the ERP system in and of itself is not going to give us all the reporting and analysis we want. When we get that info, what happens is it's time to do some analysis. And those of us, I come from an accounting background, 30 years of doing accounting. And when that information comes through, typically you wind up going back into your same system, and you're either running other reports or you're creating exports, and then you're moving information around inside of Excel. When you've got a great traditional enterprise application, a browser-based application, the actuals are coming in, and the ability to do analysis is there because you can drill down and drill through and see transactions, things that you simply cannot do inside of Excel. So the close becomes a really intensive process. And then you have to think about, well, okay, so I'm thinking about either side. Do I want file-based Excel or do I want a browser-based app? And you have to think about the things that happen on the fly. So, the way things used to work in my area was when the year would close or the quarter would close, there was always some sort of post-closing adjustment. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to rerun all of your information all over again to try and get your stuff back together? Or is there a way to just try and get that information faster? And we all know if we've used file-based Excel, you can make a topside entry, like an adjustment to something that your boss says, oh, we're going to make this adjustment real quick. Yeah, they're posting it in the GL and they're keeping it so that it's auditable for, all the government regulation and all the regulatory reporting that's out there. But he needs that information immediately. So you can make a quick change inside your Excel spreadsheet, and then you got to hope that it's going to everything else. In your browser-based app, you simply can't do that. You're either going to have to rerun your process and wait for it, and that could be a bit of a tedious process. And then you have to think about the other things that take place outside of, I'm going to say, the finance-led area. Operational planning, to name but a few, sales planning, right? I could put a million items on top of this particular PowerPoint, but operational planning is fundamental to try and understand what's getting to our general ledger and how it's coming in there from there. And of course, regulatory reporting. And then last but not least is how do we collect that data so that we can report on it? So there's so much out there, and it could make your head explode trying to think about how do we do this? It's not just a P&L. It's not just a balance sheet or a cash flow statement. So as we continue to kind of traverse through that, right, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to understand that there are so many more intensive processes that you're doing in Excel today, but you're probably trying to do with your browser-based app. So as we move to the next slide, we're going to talk very briefly about the landscape that is now setting up. So BARC, who is one of the biggest peer review companies that are sitting out there today, and they are a global peer review company, had partnered up with BPM Partners. And those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, Craig Schiff does a magnificent job over at BPM. And they got together, and what they did was they went and they polled the office of the CFO and the FP&A professionals and said, if you had a magic wand, what would the landscape of FP&A look like tomorrow? And what's interesting, and this is for, I don't want to date myself, but this is for those of us that have been doing this for years and years and years, is the number one response was self-service and ease of use. And the reason why I want to talk about that for a minute is because years ago, it was all self-service, right? It was self-service BI, do it yourself. You should be able to build all these things yourself and put it all together. And then the world started moving more central, and it became, no. We don't want you to touch this. We want to automate it as much as we possibly can and make the ease of use a little better, but we don't want you serving yourself and writing your own reports to do this stuff. We want to flip that switch, and that kind of happened in a bit of the I'm going to say early to mid 2000s. And then over the last few years, we have seen it start to come back, where, quite frankly, IT, who kind of inserted themselves into this, are now starting to get to a point where they like to remove themselves from the process. And so the more IT wants to remove itself from the process, the more the accounting and finance departments have become a self-service. Let me get this information myself, because when I call down to IT or I need to make a change, it takes a really long time for me to get whatever it is that I'm looking for. So very interesting that self-service and ease of use is now the number one. This is what everybody's looking for. They're also looking for a modern cloud-based solution. So as you're thinking in your head about what our conversation is today, well, you can't really do that in Excel. Then you're looking for scenario and driver-based planning, and you've got really good flexibility in Excel. You can certainly do scenarios. Driver-based planning is going to require a lot of complex formulas, but you could do it. The browser-based side seems a little bit more logical, when it comes to that. The name FP&A is starting to be replaced with what they call integrated planning. So integrated planning is a little bit of what we just talked about on the previous slide. The ability to do things outside of finance. How do we get things that aren't just finance-led planning? What about operational planning? What about sales planning? What about project planning? Understanding our new work that's coming through the door, understanding our products and what our material costs are, understanding distribution, and then how all of that obviously relates back to what's inside of our GL and how it all comes together. And finally, the last two are interesting to me that they were lower on the list. Number one, data unity, right? Meaning the ability, that's the old one version of the truth conversation. How do we bring all our data together? Now, perhaps a lot of that has been brought together, right? In the modern era, if you go back a few years, being able to bring that disparate data together was a near impossible task. Perhaps it's dropped on the list because of the fact that it's now become something that a lot of IT shops are doing a better job of, and you are able to bring that stuff together. I mean, there was the warehouse word that was brought together, and then there was the data lake term that was brought together. So perhaps it's possible that that's dropped down in importance because most people already have it. And then last but not least, because we know it's coming, a colleague of mine was with me at a conference in New York City about 2 weeks ago. And in that conference, there wasn't a single solitary booth that we saw that did not say something about artificial intelligence. Now, did they have it and could they show it? Not really, but it's coming. It's down the pike. I saw a study yesterday that said 57% of CFOs know that AI is definitely coming, and they're just trying to get themselves ready for it. So it's there, and it's something that we have to think about. And as we're considering our browser-based application versus our file-based Excel, I think that that's something that we want to make sure that we're considering. So keep those in your mind. Obviously, Jess will be sharing this out to everybody at some point so that you can definitely see this or rewatch, but these seem to be the hot buttons as we go through. I want to stop there because I think we had a poll question. Yep. Go ahead, Jess.
Sharing the results here of our poll question. The top things, we have tied for the top 3 things: flexible and collaborative, scenario, driver-based planning, and predictive and AI modeling. Those are the top for this group, with low-key also concerned about being secure and controlled. Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our next poll now, which is, what do you use? So what type of FP&A solution are you or your company using today? And this is pretty divided, like it's just Excel or it's either the traditional or the browser-based application. So thank you for voting here. That's awesome. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A bar at the bottom of your Zoom thing. You can drop any questions you'd like us to address at the end of the session. We will return to those. So feel free to drop anything there, and I'll pass it back to John now.
All right, so it's time to dive in, right? So let's start talking about the spreadsheet side first, and like what the spreadsheet problem is. Some of you that are sitting out there, a lot of this is going to resonate with you. And again, back to my own practice, this certainly resonated with me. I made a change overall, but once Excel became too overwhelming, we had to move to something else, and that's for another conversation. But let's talk about the spreadsheet problem today. Number one, there are complex spreadsheets that are distributed either on network drives or through email. That means you're going to lose track of your current version. And, I was joking the other day, raise your hand to yourself if you've got at some point a final version 2, a final version 3. It's absolutely hysterical because I can't even begin to tell you how many times I created my boss would say to me, this is the last version. And I'd be like, okay. And I would mark it final. And then they would come back and go, can we make another change? So the next thing you know, you've got final version 1, final version 2. So you never even really know where it is. Then you've got to worry because you're passing this out to so many other people. That statistic that I gave you a little earlier, that errors can creep in. And when errors creep in, you're doing nothing but clerking and admin. So you wind up having weekend work. You're missing your daughter or your son play soccer on Saturday because you've got to get that stuff done. What if analysis and reporting becomes manual and tedious? Because trying to make changes, your boss comes out to you and tells you some outlandish thought process. We're going to open up a new store. We're going to open up a new department. We're launching in another area, new region, and they want to see what it looks like. But don't change the overall budget. We just want to see what it looks like. So that becomes, woo, holy cow, that is a lot of spreadsheets, right? And now you've got new scenarios that are going to take days, not minutes, and copying models and pasting, and now you've got more potential errors again, and you've got time wasted getting aligned on the actual numbers and those underlying assumptions. And then last but not least is like where the real pain is, right? You're burned out from the constant stress of the manual consolidation of your files. The repetitive tasks are sucking up your time and your energy, and there's no time for what you got hired to do. So the interesting part was I was hired as a senior financial analyst. I never analyzed a single solitary thing. It took me 20 work days just to get our information together. So you can't help, the things you wanted to be able to do, the things where you wanted to help the company make better decisions are things that you just simply can't get to. And if we had more time, I could give you a million use cases of things that we've done here at Paris with some of our customers coming to us where it took them forever to try and do a reforecast and it was too late, for some of the things that took place. Ultimately, what happens is your staff thinks that there's a better place for you to do it. But unfortunately, everyone's really doing the same thing. And that is the spreadsheet problem. So as we look at our quadrant that Jessica built out for us, let's go to that next slide, Jess. What we want to do is we want to see what the pros are of Excel and what the cons are, right? And in a nutshell, we talked about them a little bit. If you've got secure and controlled going up the path over here, you're not going to get a lot of that when it comes to Excel. But on the right-hand side at the bottom grid there, you've got flexible and easy to use, right? So some of you voted for flexible and easy to use. I vote for flexible and easy to use. So Excel gives you that flexibility. It gives you strong modeling. So even though it might take time, you can certainly model a whole lot faster. You can do a lot of powerful calculations and you can really make it look pretty, the kind of the way that you want it to. But what are the cons? Well, the cons are you've got data integrity issues. You have no idea where that data is coming from because you've got no source system integration. All your consolidations are manual. And most important, in today's world of regulation, you have that lack of audit ability. And what I mean by that is if I pass my sheet down to Jess and she made some sort of change and it comes back to me and I know that something's wrong and maybe there's somebody out there, Joe and Mary, and they've made changes as well. I have no idea who made those changes, what changes they made and how. So I can't even keep track of that information and it comes back on me because I'm in charge of FP&A and now I've got myself a problem. So there's good and there's bad. It's all the way on the right of our quadrant, but it's not exactly the most secure and controlled environment. Data is a problem. So you're like, okay. So now let's look at the traditional or the browser-based side, and let's look at if this is you. And when you think about a browser-based application, there are certain things that you are getting. You are getting a standardized corporate performance management application, right? And those guys are sitting out there, and some of you that are out there right now may be using them. Workday Adaptive, Anaplan, OneStream, Columo. They are great applications, and they are meant to streamline, centralize, and automate that chaos that we just talked about one slide ago. How do I get rid of all those things? But the vendors and the consultants that build it, they're never going to get the model quite right. Why? Well, if you go back and you think about like just my own personal use case, 15 years I spent building out my Excel models the way that I liked them. Once they came in with that browser-based app, they're going to get it close. But what you have to understand is a browser-based application is built for the universe. It's not built for John. And so John's got to find a way to make that work. And if he wants to make adjustments and changes, they are very costly. So you've got the frustration of working in a bureaucratic browser-based system, doesn't necessarily adjust itself to reality. As we continue on inside of this particular side, we've got some further conversation about the fact that it's dependent on a corporate platform and it now takes you out of Excel. And let's stop and talk about that one for a minute. All of you that are sitting out there right now with a browser-based application are going to say, no, not my application. It's got an Excel add-in. Yes, it does. Because what they realized in the traditional model was, okay, now we've pulled everyone out of Excel and they're disappointed. And now, and no spoiler alerts because my next slide is really cool. So now you've got all these people that are outside of Excel. They're working inside of a browser-based application, and then they still really kind of need Excel. So what these companies started doing is they said, okay, we're going to give you an Excel add-in. And the Excel add-in's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's not as flexible because it's really going to keep you inside the purview of the system. And you can't really write back from that Excel model. You can't build your own stuff inside that Excel add-in. You can just use some functionality that they gave you so that you can do some things a little bit different. And what that does is it provides gaps in your functionality. You're now doing things a little bit different. It lacks the detail that you're looking for. It certainly lacks the flexibility that you want and the speed to benefit. And then last but not least, and maybe even the most important, is it's owned and maintained by some intermediary. So you don't own it. Now I'm going to stop right there. In that survey we did that we heard from BARC and BPM Partners, they said self-service #1. So here we are saying, well, this is not going to be self-service because it's owned by the IT department or by the third-party vendor who put it all together for you. None of them really understand your financial model. So when you go down to them and you try to get what you need, they take a crack at it, but it's still not right. They're going to fail to keep it current with a day-to-day and month-to-month business reality that you just don't have the flexibility now and the ability to kind of work through. So you don't know, you've got all the good parts of what the browser-based app gives you. So let's look at that side now. I think we're going to the next slide. And when you look at a traditional enterprise application, here's the great stuff. Hey man, I'm in a controlled environment. My data is going to be spot on. I never have to worry about it. I've got workflow management. So I know like when I've done something and then Jess has done something, we absolutely know it's passing, back and forth. It's auditable. So at any given time, I know who entered what and where. But similar to Excel, where we were all the way on the right-hand side and flexible and easy to use, now we're all the way up the chain on secure and controlled because we've now lost the flexibility, right? You have to, in order to give something, in order to get something, you got to give something, right? So you're getting that environment that you want, but now you're out of spreadsheets. It's rigid. It lacks that flexibility. It's IT consulting intensive. And worst of all, it's a tremendously high cost of ownership. So you've lost that self-service BI portion that kind of comes along with it. So let's go to the next slide. Yep.
Hang on one sec. I'm just going to jump in here to share the results here. This was an even split of who we've got on today. So it's legit half and half. All right.
That's perfect, right? Perfect for our conversation.
Yep. So I'm going to move on here.
So what's interesting is this stat right here. And the reason why they built out all of those, this was my big reveal. PwC did a study in 2023 that said 84% of all companies that had adopted a formal enterprise technology ended up supplementing that system with spreadsheets, meaning you're doing everything you need to do in that browser-based app, but you're still exporting information to Excel. You're still doing your analysis in Excel. You're still mixing and matching and probably even doing what-if scenarios and other things like that inside of Excel. 84% of you. So I know you're nodding along. Those of you that on the poll said that you had a browser-based app, I know you are because I was there myself. I did the exact same thing. I pulled it all back down into Excel because Excel is like a warm and comfortable blanket. So is there a better way or a right way? Well, yeah, that's why we're here, right? The big end of conversation for today is this is the better way to FP&A, and it's through Paris Technologies, where what you're going to see with Paris Technologies is an Excel front end where we're embracing Excel, template integration where we can take that model that you've been building and improving for 12 years of your career and integrate it. It's going to be cloud-based. So now you've got data integrity. The reason why you have data integrity is because everything that you're trying to do, you can still do in Excel, but you are connected to data that's in the cloud. And it's going to take Microsoft Excel and it's going to turn it into an application. What do I mean by that? When you enter information into Excel, it's now going into the cloud, into a secured database that is controlled. So now you know where everything is, who's done it, and when. All your clerking and administering goes away because now you've got this template that's connected. So you get all the best parts of the browser-based app. You can do all your reporting and all your analytics. And then last but not least, the self-service that you want is right there for you. You can keep expanding your model. You can build new models on the fly. So in the flexible and easy to use, Paris is all the way on the right like Excel. And in the secure and controlled, as we move to the top, Paris is at the top. So that is pretty much where we are. And I love, like, we throw this slide up, the other part of what we do. So if you are not a finance professional and you are a contributor or a creator, you can actually use our product as well, because we do have a browser-based application that comes along with our Excel product as well. So you get everything that you would be looking for, but it's an Excel-first system. And then the ability to have those that don't use Excel. So finance leads the way in everything that they do inside of Excel. So I think we're on poll question number 3, and we're running a minute late, so I apologize.
Yep. This is poll question number 3, which is just asking, given today's presentation, if you'd be inclined to see a demonstration. And I'm going to move now quickly to our Q&A. Just want to mention that if you scan this QR code with your phone, you can book a call. It'll take you right to our calendar, and we would be happy to talk to you about all the ins and outs of your FP&A situation, whether it's spreadsheets or browser-based. So I'm going to leave that up here while I bring up our first, or while I share our first question. So just give me a second to read this. Okay, so somebody's gone all in with a browser-based system and they still do a lot in Excel. Assuming we wanted to switch to an Excel front-end cloud solution, can any of the work we have done in the current system be leveraged for a different solution, or do we need to start from scratch? What has been your experience?
That is a fantastic question. So what it really comes down to is, coming out of that browser-based system, we really just need to see the data that's sitting behind it. Once, if we can access that data, and in most of these systems we can, then yes, we're going to leverage all of the things that you already had. We can bring that information over. You are not starting from scratch. On the template side, on the front end, so let's talk about the front end now. There would be some rework, obviously, because we can't take a browser-based application and just port it to Excel templates. So we would need to rebuild your templates, but you probably are going to want to change those templates anyway, because the browser-based app that you purchased kind of got close to what you wanted, but wasn't everything you wanted. Now you're going to be able to have everything that you've ever wanted. So great question. I hope that answered it.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much. Well, that basically wraps up our session for today. Everybody will get a recording of this session, so you'll be able to see. So thank you everybody for joining, and have a great rest of your day or evening, depending where you are in the world.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.